So it all starts within ourselves. So if I can look at myself and what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and what I think is real and or true, what do I think is knowledge, and ask those questions and keep digging, that will have an impact on every decision I make, every person that I talk to. It will have a trickling effect all across these local areas and it will trickle out.
Through the halls of memories, brush strokes of history, capturing humanity. Stories left untold, whispers of the past, secrets they withhold. Yeah, yeah. The condition reborn.
To get to it because you're an interesting guy and you've done so many incredible things. Let's start here. This is where I think we need to start. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's start with this. You have the biggest email signature I've ever seen in my life. And that's a good thing. It's amazing the things that you've done. Can I read all these?
Sure.
Can you tell me about it? Okay. So collaborator, Emergent Exchange. Board member, Friends of Constituent Park. Board member, OSIPI Economic Development Council. Vice chair, Volunteers in Medicine of New Hampshire. Founder of Nature's Heart Mission. President Emeritus, The Chase Home. Principal Philosopher, Philosopher Files. Senior Online Adjunct Facility, College of Professional Studies, UNH. CEO, Exponential Squared. And then your name, PhD, MBA. That's amazing. So let's start at the bottom. What is Emergent Exchange?
Emergent Exchange is a collaboration with several folks, some associated with California Institute of Integral Studies and others outside of that. And our idea, we need to return to it, is to facilitate dialogues focused on new solutions, new ways of approaching complicated problems in the world with the backdrop that we are in an ecological crisis. There's climate change, these massive issues that are affecting the world. We're trying to contextualize them and discuss new ways of approaching problems framed within these larger issues that sometimes just sort of go under the radar. We hear about climate change, we hear about problems across the world, but what are we necessarily doing about any of these things? So how can we start to move forward together collaboratively right now in addressing issues that really do affect all of us day to day, even though we live as if they do not?
That seems like a rather big undertaking.
Yes, when you think about any sort of problem or issue that exists in the world, if we look at it from a systems theoretical standpoint, everything is connected to everything. So, to sort of provide a simple example that might be more palatable, someone is sad on a particular day. It's Monday, and I'm really bummed out. Why am I bummed out? Well, something might have just happened an hour ago. Something might have happened the day before. Something might have happened 3 weeks prior. I may be experiencing an event that has triggered trauma that happened 7 years ago. When you look at anything, it's connected to a variety of different systems. And if we look at any sort of problem from a systems perspective, it just allows us to be more inclusive in imagining what might really be happening. And even from a business standpoint, in a business system, it's helpful to think about that too. Hey, I've got a marketing problem. I really need this thing. Well, that might be symptoms of something else going on. So let's have a dialogue and sort of discover where this problem actually begins.
What is Friends of Constituent Park?
Friends of Constitution Park is a park about 15 to 20 minutes away from where I live. It is, I don't know the dimensions of the park, but it's a beautiful area where people, it's in Ospey, New Hampshire, and people can experience nature. There are walking trails. There's a dog park. There's a Frisbee golf park as well, and also provides the only public access to Ospey Lake in New Hampshire. So, Ossipee, New Hampshire is a hidden gem in the state of New Hampshire. But people, well, it's a hidden gem. People don't know about it. So this park is a way to bring people in to say, hey, there's something beautiful in this town, and we're trying to rejuvenate the local area. And this park is a gathering spot. And so my hope is to help grow the profile of this park, to help build up the infrastructure of the town initially through recreation and health and wellness.
Obviously, I know what an economic development council is. What is the Volunteers in Medicine of New Hampshire?
Yeah, that's a great organization. I'm so thankful to be a part of it. Dr. Reiko Johnson is the founder, and I connected with her, I don't know, maybe about 4 years ago, and she asked me to serve on the board after I built their website. So it's an organization that is part of, I guess, it's a franchise of a national conglomerate, all built and run by volunteers. And this is the last state in the country to have a volunteers in medicine. And so what we do is there are people struggling with homelessness in New Hampshire. And so Volunteers in Medicine of New Hampshire kind of brings the services to them. So we partner up with local agencies and sort of set up a mobile shop, and people who are struggling with homelessness are able to access services on the spot. And then our doctors and volunteers can serve as a triage and connect these individuals with other community supports. So it's a wonderful organization. We actually had a dental day of caring on the weekend. I don't know all of the numbers yet, but Dr. Johnson did let me know on the weekend. It was a big success, and I'm thrilled for that. So folks who are struggling, with their teeth, we were able to partner with dentists who are willing to offer services at no charge. So I can only assume that probably anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 worth of dental work were performed on folks at no charge. So it really is a wonderful organization. And Dr. Johnson is just such a wonderful person. I'm so glad to be associated with this organization.
Offshoot here. How do you get doctors to volunteer their time to, I mean, dentists, I'd imagine, to do this? Do you just call up all the ones in the area and say, hey, we're doing this program?
Pretty much, yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of folks are willing to volunteer their time. A lot of people make donations. And so, in the nonprofit world, it's less about asking people to donate time and donate resources. It's more about building relationships. So if you know someone, if we're friends, and I say, hey, Ian, do you have an hour to do something next week for this constituency? They're struggling. I'm doing this, that, or the other. I'd love for you to consider joining me. That's a much harder ask than just sort of cold calling people out of the blue. So a lot of it is, just leveraging people you already know, but you also have a compelling mission. And if you
Yeah.
build relationships, and through those relationships, people feel like they're a part of something. So yeah, people are incredibly generous. And so it really is kind of incredible how many people are willing to help. But it starts with a strong mission and having a charismatic leader, like Reiko to lead the charge. And I certainly, fill that role with other organizations with whom I work, but I don't really have that role at Volunteers in Medicine. I'm kind of the marketing guy, strategist, just a sounding board,
Yeah.
just a general sort of a person. But
Yeah.
it really is about Reiko.
What's Nature's Heart mission?
Well, that organization has now morphed into something called Echo Dialogues, and that's an organization that I will more formally launch in the next several weeks, and it results from my doctoral research. And my research is very interested in personal and societal transformation. How do we transform anything? And my contribution to research is space as metaphor for transformation. Well, how do we use space, whether it's external space or internal space? Well, through dialogue is one pathway where we can really, change our experience of space, both within and outside of us. And so in Echo Dialogues, I will be having conversations with researchers, with people out in the field, really anyone to talk about, who they are, their identity, how they approach problems, their thoughts on transformation, what's worked, what hasn't, their opinions on the state of the world. And what I'll do is I'll look for emergent themes that result from these dialogues, bring everyone together, maybe on a biannual basis, and just produce reports and content and distribute it to all kinds of different people to let them know from the ground floor and from the top what are possibly new ways to work together, to understand each other. When you engage in dialogue with the intent to not necessarily just to talk, of course I'm talking now, but to enter into dialogue with the intent to really listen, to what someone is saying, and to suspend in that conversation what I think is true and or real, and to really bring in that person's perspective. If I'm thinking and holding on to just what I think is true, what someone is saying is just kind of bouncing around me and then it bounces out. But if I'm able to just open myself up and suspend my belief system for a short period of time and just be all ears to what's being said, that's going to have a real transformative impact on my worldview. And if that person can do that in kind, that's not a conversation, that's a dialogue. And a communication, oftentimes, when someone's having an argument, and we've all had unfortunate conversations. What happens when we're when we're engaged in an unfortunate conversation? We're having a tennis match. You're taking your idea, you're slamming it over the net. The other person's, slapping it back. You don't know what that person's saying because you're getting ready to launch into your drive. There's really no understanding taking place. If you go into a dialogue, you slow down, you're aware of what you're thinking and how you're thinking as you're listening. And it's a real mindful exercise in which, a person can realistically look at expanding their consciousness in the moment. And so it's a practical way to engage in a deeper kind of communication with the intent to deeply listen, to understand. And that focus is definitely different than a lot of communications that all of us have day to day.
Your museum website says it's inclusive. But what happens if a guest doesn't speak English? The 42 Kites Premium Devices translates your exhibit text into over 100 different languages, even Zulu. Only at 42kites.com.
The Chase Home.
Yeah, the Chase Home is a wonderful organization. I was board president for about 6 years, served on the board for 9, founded in 1877, and it started out as an orphanage and morphed through the years into a residential home where kids have been mandated by the state to receive extra supports. We also work out in the community. These are kids who have become ensnared in several different ways in the state system. Whether it's through through neglect and abuse, or maybe they're committing petty crimes and they're sort of entering the system through that pathway. Chase Home is assigned by the state to work with these kids. So if it's a real serious case and the state feels and Chase Home agrees, these kids need to be removed, from the home and live at the Chase Home while they're receiving support, that's what Chase Home can do. If there are opportunities to keep the child within the family dynamic to prevent placement at the Chase Home or a similar residential facility, there are staff qualified to do that. And there are also there's a diversion program as well, where kids who are really becoming ensnared in the juvenile justice system, rather than being penalized, like an adult and sort of essentially not thrown in jail, but a punitive measure, they're diverted into a diversion program, which helps the kids better understand how they've gotten to where they've been, what are some of the triggers and causes, what are the root issues there, and also working with the family dynamic as well. So wonderful organization, and definitely always will be close to my heart.
Yeah, anything working with kids is great. Philosopher Files, that's your blog, right?
Yeah, Philosopher Files, anyone, I may be aging myself, and even though I was alive when the show was on in the 1970s, I was very young, but one of my favorite shows is the Rockford Files. And I just loved Jim Rockford. Every week, he would, be hanging around his camper there off the beach. And, invariably a beautiful woman would knock on his door and she would need help, some sort of investigative work or something. And
Right.
his fridge was always empty, save for, I don't drink anymore, but he would always have a couple beers in his fridge and maybe a steak. And he just seemed to live life just large and off the cuff. And he had this substratum of honor and integrity as well. And so the Rockford Files served as the basis for my concept of the Philosopher Files. And each file is an idea about a concept, and it could be philosophical. It could be about love. It could be about organizational behavior. It could be about management. It could be about personal growth, transpersonal psychology. I have wide interests, and Philosopher Files is sort of my attempt to peel back the layers of not just society, because ultimately everything, and this is my belief, grounded in research, everything that I see and or think about anything out there is a reflection of what is inside me. And so
Yeah.
if I can deeply understand myself and my assumptions and how I feel and what I think is true and or real, it can give me incredible insight into how I interact with the world and hold space for other people. So if I want to care about other human beings, I really need to deeply understand myself so I can be of service to others. So if I don't know where I begin and end, it's going to be very difficult to understand how I can help other people because I may just be interacting with myself. And so my doctoral research was really a wonderful process in that I was able to decolonize myself and seriously look at my assumptions as a human being, to reimagine myself as a man in this society. So I felt humbled by that process, and it was also a serious process. So I'm a joyous person and full of care and laughter, but I also feel a sense of seriousness and responsibility for everything on the planet. I don't necessarily know how to embody that, but I can say that it starts right now. And so I try to make every encounter that I have meaningful and full of care, and I try to be as present as I possibly can. So it's certainly my intent.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job. You are by far the most ambitious person I've ever met. So there's a few others on here, the Senior Online Adjunct Facility at UNH and the CEO of Exponential Squared. Can we take a look at your website for a second?
Sure.
So consultancy, marketing, development, fundraising. So who is your, we'll call it the target market? What organizations do you mostly work with?
I work with small for-profit businesses and nonprofit organizations, primarily cultural institutions. I started out working with human service organizations, but my company has kind of morphed into primarily working with museums. So, to strip this down to its essence, I generally work with organizations that are community based and don't have a lot of resources, and they need assistance with strategy. And so, from that need, I've been able throughout the course of my career to develop many of the skills that can help support that. So not only can I help, build strategic plans, but I can also jump into any area of the operation and add some value. I have people at my company who can execute different aspects of that. I still work within my company as well. I'm the primary storyteller as well. Now that I'm done with my doctorate, I would imagine that I will work more on eco dialogues and philosopher files. to try to tie in everything that I'm doing into a broader vision. I would love to reimagine a more vibrant world where people can really feel included and to inspire people to understand themselves and to make that effort. And I do think that those sorts of efforts can help shift conversations from what's wrong out there to what's possible within ourselves as human beings. And so those are the kinds of conversations and or dialogues in which I would like to engage. But again, I love Exponential Squared. I love what we're doing. Marketing and development is a great arena to be able to have these kinds of expansive conversations when people are trying to think about how do we promote this thing? How do we raise money? You have to engage in some sort of philosophical thinking to kind of figure that out. And so that's why I really love marketing and development, because a lot of it is just, well, what kind of story are we trying to tell? How do we arrive at this understanding of what we think people will want or what we think is the need in the community? Are there different ways to go about that? And so I wanted to further my education to be able to take extra steps and say, hey, I can help you market, but I'd like to do more. Like, let's go talk to the people that we think we're helping. Let's have different expansive conversations with other stakeholders, and really try to weave a larger tapestry here. And so I knew that I needed to really get that doctoral degree to be able to do that. Little did I realize that getting that degree would really change so much about me. So I feel like I went in with one intent, into my doctoral studies, and I've, exited feeling substantially differently than I thought I would about everything in life. And so that's kind of exciting. And so I think I'm probably at a crossroads to some extent, in my life. I'm about to turn 50, so I feel like I've lived my life in one particular way in the first half of my life. Now I'm looking out at the next half because I'd like to make it to 100 or maybe 105 or maybe 108. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do in the next half of my life? I've been going to school all these years. I've got 5 college degrees. So I've been going to school all these years. I think I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Not done learning, but now I'm going to be learning in a different way. So it's very exciting and humbling. I feel like I've lived long enough to experience all kinds of things, but I feel like I'm also young enough that I'm still very curious what's around that corner. I'm curious. Let's go together. I don't want to go by myself. I want to go with people. I'm not a hero. My doctoral research was all about criticizing the hero's journey as a useful metaphor for transformation. The hero is just one part of a larger story, and that's why I like to think about space. What is happening around us that can help us understand who is within that space. Let's think about everything in this space, and that'll give us a much wider look at what may be happening. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. I tend to go off on tangents, but that's the best I can do.
No, that was great. And to add to the list of things that you've done and accomplished, you're also a poet.
Indeed.
So I was looking at the Great Pains. This is deep, man. Especially down here, I highlighted this. Without an observable trace of the pain I experienced and caused, the scars inside my heart that will not heal.
Hmm.
What's going on there?
Yeah, the great pains of life. Yeah, I love that poem. Maybe the question could be, to some extent, what isn't going on there? I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it's a good question. I don't necessarily, have an answer. I think poetry for me has always been a very innate way that I would express myself. So, I try to express, thoughts and feelings that I have, and recognizing that how I am as a human is not so unique to the extent that others can't understand me. I am part of a larger system. I'm a human being. I both influence and I'm a product of my environment. And so I think, to every extent, the pain that I feel is not universal in that, it necessarily relates to all the nuances of everyone's life, but that I feel pain, I think, can be shared with others. So I think, in that poem, I remember writing it, and I loved it. It was deeply personal, and I like to not put a filter on my heart and how I'm experiencing the world. And so, with all of the different titles I have or acronyms, at the essence of who I am, I think I'm most likely a poet and a writer. I've always been able to be able to use words in creative ways, to get at something that's mystical. I think likely I am a mystic more than anything else. I feel a palpable sense of mystery all the time, and my poems hopefully tap into that. So hopefully, to some extent, if someone is hearing me read a poem or just reading it, I'm hoping that it's spinning people off into new worlds inside their own hearts, and they can explore that. And if they don't remember what I've said, even better, because there's so much to explore in each person. We are all universes, all beautiful and sacred. And so hopefully my poems are sparks that can invite, exploration, within people. If I search myself long enough, what will I find? I'll find you, because we're all reciprocally embedded in one another. And there's something very humbling in that. Search deep enough inside myself, and I will find you, and you will find me. And I think to some extent, that poem may touch on that a little bit. I appreciate, the pain that I've experienced in my life that even I myself have caused, because it is all part of who I am today. And so, I think all of us have done things and said things and experienced things that, gosh, in hindsight, boy, I wish I hadn't done that. Well, really, because now we have a deep understanding. So those sorts of, painful moments and things that we might consider mistakes, if we can reframe that, it can really allow us to grow and be much more mindful when presented with a similar situation. We're going to take a step back and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to approach this differently. And we can really be conscious in the moment. It doesn't mean we still won't mess up and say, gosh, I don't know why I said that. But at least there's a layer of intentionality and consciousness that's possible. And I'm pretty certain that my consciousness in my mid-20s was severely underdeveloped. I mean, as a man, we are limited in a lot of ways. Our whole society encourages us to feel as if the world's our oyster. I step out the door and the world is ready for Robert. And to some extent, it almost is. Our whole society is built with privilege and welcoming me, because of my positionality as a white man. For other people, they don't have those doors just opening up. And, so I'm touching on a concept known as double consciousness. Double consciousness is something that marginalized people and women have developed, in their everyday life, the ability to imagine themselves as someone else looking at themselves, because they have to have that care and concern for their safety and just navigating the day. I never had to do that growing up. I just thought, well, what I think is real for everyone, and I have a responsibility to educate the universe on what I think is real, because my experience is universal. It's really not. Everything is contextualized. There's definitely a sense of, or reality is very complicated, and it really isn't the same for each and every person. So I had to go through academics, and go to different schools and really learn and unlearn things to hopefully develop a deeper appreciation for other ways of knowing and looking at the world. So again, I know that doesn't necessarily answer your question about the poem, but that poem results from that kind of paradigm.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I also like that you, excuse me. I also like that you speak your poems as well, so people can actually hear your voice. That's really cool.
Indeed, yeah. I've always, my best friend Ralph from high school, we still talk quite often. I would call him up, and his last name is Costanzo, and I'd say, Costanzo, you ready? I wrote another, and I would read the poem, and so through the course of time, he has heard many poems, and yeah, I always like to read it because in the delivery of that poem, there's a lot of nuance and meaning there. I've never gone to, I don't like the idea necessarily of poetry slams and all of that. I'm more of a one-on-one person. So I have poetry books that I've saved. So every poem I've ever written or written on little books in in my dissertation, I was able to reference poetry that I wrote 30 years prior. I wasn't really impressed with the syntax, but it was evidence of larger themes that have always sort of run throughout my life. So yeah, poetry, I remember sitting in math class, probably in 1990. And for some weird reason, I started feeling, well, I'd always been philosophical, but I started feeling philosophical in a way that made me want to write a poem. So I've got these, I'm doing, I don't know, the cosine of this angle of some triangle, and all of a sudden there's a poem there. And I remember I showed my friend, Tim Hofer, who was sitting in front of me, and I showed him my poem. He was like, "You just wrote that?" I said, "Yeah." And he was just like, "Wow, like that's really very intriguing. Like, why would you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know." And so, just it started this poetic way of looking at life.
When your exhibits are outdoors and there is no electricity and no wall labels, how can you help guests explore those exhibits? The 42 Kites premium devices work great in sun-drenched meadows, rain-soaked trails, and snow-covered landscapes. They work anywhere you want them to. Only at 42kites.com.
Just rewinding a couple minutes, you were talking about marginalized people and their experiences out in the world. Like you, white man, but when my wife and I did a lot of traveling, and we traveled for 3 years, we were in places where I was the one that looked different, and I
Mm,
was the one that didn't speak the language. And that was a very eye-opening experience. That doesn't happen in the United States,
mm,
but I definitely felt that in various countries. It was interesting.
mm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Let's go here. I love I love this picture, by the way. Hold on. Look at this. Is this Shatner?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's Captain Kirk.
That's quite the outfit he's got on there. I noticed that this is the Philosopher Files section of your website, right? I noticed it started in 2020. Was this I'm in lockdown, I need to get stuff out of my head result?
No, I had always wanted to share my ideas. Oftentimes in my career as a marketer, I'm promoting other people's ideas, and
Yeah.
I'm promoting other programs. And meanwhile, people didn't really know me. I was hatching plans and going to school and learning, and I was keeping everything kind of bottled up. And I've always felt a compulsion throughout my life to say something and to stand for something. So I think Philosopher Files was my tentative first steps to really embody, that which I had most likely denied. Because if you look through the Philosopher Files, it's very vulnerable. I'm being very intimate. I'm just being very open with my humanity, and that's me. And there are people that could have known me for 15 years and just knew me as the marketing guy or my PR guy. And I'm thinking there's a whole lot more to me than just that slice. So I think that started the Philosopher Files started that those first steps. And when I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies for my PhD in transformative studies, I applied in April of 2020. So I think that the backdrop for that was definitely the pandemic and the ecological crisis. But the Philosopher Files was more like, it's time to share some of my thoughts. But probably somewhere in the back of my head, I was thinking I actually need to do a lot more than just the Philosopher Files. I really need to take one step further, into my education, and really, sort of maybe take a different approach to my life. I felt lack. My kids were young adults. Their lives hadn't gone, according to their plans or mine. And I was just really feeling disoriented. There's a theoretical framework by Thomas Mesereau and talks about, disorienting dilemmas in life. And I was definitely experiencing a disorienting dilemma in the pandemic. And then, as we get older and we look at, where we are and where we thought, we would be at this point, when we were younger, it's like, hey, who am I? This isn't what I thought my life was going to be about. And I just felt a real lack. And it seemed like in early 2020, I just had a number of events that were happening that were making me question my paradigm. And that's as I discovered, in my doctoral studies, I was a classic case, ready for transformation. If you're going to transform, there has to be some sort of, reason. And I had all kinds of things happening that I could see interpreting my life through different theories. It's like, wow, these theoretical frameworks don't explain every single, day that I've lived, but they certainly help to explain patterns of my behavior. And so again, I meant to answer your question, but it is all connected. The pandemic certainly was a shocking, event. And even to this very moment, I'm very concerned about the events that are taking place across the world. In academic research, we call it the ecological crisis. It's also called polycrisis. And the ecological crisis is much more than just climate change. There's social inequity. There's all kinds of complicated issues all across the globe, and they're all enmeshed. When there's globalization, what's happening 7,000 miles away is affecting us. So they're having a war, in another country, and we get our grain from there. They can't ship the grain over. Our prices skyrocket. People are struggling. There's all kinds of different things happening. So we are in a global economy where what is local and what is not local, those definitions are very muddied right now. So I think it behooves all of us to care about everybody. Now, how does that, how do we embody that day to day? I think that we have, I can't help people 10,000 miles away, but what I can do is every single person that I meet today, I can approach them with care. I can try to be open-minded. I can try to, be of service, to what they need. And so if every person, we can all look at our lives and say, hey, why do I think what I'm thinking now? Is there a different way I can approach this or that? Or how can I spread kindness? Or how can I, reimagine something? Maybe I can ask a different question. If we can enter our everyday lives with just a little bit of a deeper awareness, the transformation can start right now. We're part of this large system, and it's not realistic to think that we can make systemic changes, but we can certainly impact locally. But if we can impact locally, they'll connect with those larger systems. So it all starts within ourselves. So if I can look at myself and what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and what I think is real and or true, what do I think is knowledge, and ask those questions and keep digging, that will have an impact on every decision I make, every person that I talk to. It will have a trickling effect all across these local areas, and it will trickle out. It's going to be a change that will take, if we're lucky enough to still be around in a couple hundred years, this will take hundreds of years. We can't make these global changes, with legislation or by making decisions that impact everyone and just say, hey, this is going to change everything. Well, we're in a system that has been going for millions of years. Anything we really want to change is going to take a long time, but we're not going to be around to see it. And we have to have faith that, hey, what I'm doing today will trickle out and still be around in the year 34, 33. I won't be around to see it, but I trust and believe that what I'm doing now, has integrity and can walk without me. But we can't just have everything be like, we need everything done by next Wednesday. That's not realistic.
Yeah. So I know we have a time constraint here. So we have to go fast these last few bits, but you were just talking about COVID. Let me ask you, what do you think was worse? COVID, the virus, or the government's response?
Oh gosh, I'm not a political person, so I that question, it's I appreciate it. It's also binary, and so I don't have a response to it. I think the government made decisions and looked at the problem in a particular way and did what it thought was best. Did it work? Depends on who you are.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated question. I don't think there's necessarily a singular answer. So I think it in general was a very complicated scenario, and so I have difficulty, sort of answering a question like that one way or another.
Sure. Let's take a look at this guy. I think you know him. Look at this guy.
Uh-oh.
When was this picture taken? Because your beard has morphed incredibly long now.
Yeah, those are more like chops. I still pine for my lamb chops. That was taken, I think, around 2016, and
Wow.
it was at a Beer for History event at the American Independence Museum, and it is was taken by Brian Dalkey, a professional photographer I had invited him to the event to cover it, gave him free tickets. Hey, we need some photos, and to this day, that image of me, I do love it. It captured
Yeah.
something about me. I look at that guy, I'm like, wow, I really like that guy. I don't know if he's me or I'm him, but and that's why I think photography is very can be quite powerful. I'm a writer, so I write all these flowery words, and it's great. And I'm always amazed at how photographers they just capture something. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, like it's a reflection of how they see the world. I take pictures too, and they're terrible. And I know that's very binary of me, and I'm being funny, I'm also being serious. So I really appreciate, all the different skills that people have in general. It's just wonderful, when you think about what people are able to do. So I've always appreciated that photo of Brian. And in a pinch, if I can't find a current photo, I just stick that up somewhere, and
Yeah.
then it's not really the way I look now, but I'm like, it's still a great photo. And then when
It
people
is.
meet me and say, I saw you, I said, well, that was a little while ago.
It's a great photo, and I like your smile. Like I feel like your personality is coming through on that image.
Definitely.
And actually, you mentioned the American Independence Museum, and that's how you and I first met. Let's just go take a look in there. So this is obviously their website. How did you get originally? I know we're pressed for time, but how did you originally get involved with them? And then you became the executive director. Explain that
Correct.
if you can in the next 6 minutes.
Well, I can explain it in probably two. I was looking to branch out on my own. I was the development director at Seacoast Mental Health Center, and I wanted to sort of hang my own shingle. And so I stumbled into the American Independence Museum. They were looking for external help for marketing. So I applied for the contractor role, and I got it. And it was essentially my first client at Exponential Squared. And then through the course of time, my role morphed into all kinds of things. I was operations manager. I planned Beer for History. I planned the American Independence Festival. I've written grants. I've done development work, gotten corporate sponsors, helped build programs. And then through the course of time, and then recently, I've now been made interim executive director. And just a wonderful organization with just a tremendous mission. We are asking deep probing questions. Who are we as Americans? What is freedom as Americans? What is freedom for whom? Has it been the same? So we're using your product, 42 Kites, and really excited to roll out digital exhibits. As I spoke prior to our podcast here, I feel that these digital exhibits will be the capstone offering that we have to the public for the next several years. Not everyone can visit the museum. Some people who can won't be able to navigate the physical constraints of these structures that are, 300 years old. we're going to have these digital exhibits that enable us to tell incredible stories from different perspectives and to shed light not just on artifacts, but who we are as Americans, who we are as human beings. And Jen, our curator, the former executive director, who I was able to bring back in a role for which she is uniquely qualified, we are going to be telling some incredible stories. I cannot wait to see the reaction that people have when we roll these out. And this may be a shameless plug for you, but Ian, you have been extremely helpful in helping Jen beautify these exhibits so that when they roll out, they're going to look great. They're going to be branded. It's going to be a good experience for people. So I am really, really super excited about digital exhibits. I think from my perspective, Jen said something the other day that ties into the digital exhibits. We want to take the curatorial experience and get it beyond these walls. And how are we going to do that? Through these digital exhibits. It's the living physical embodiment, of our inclusive mission.
Well, I know you have to get going, but I say it all the time every time I talk to you. You are by far the most smartest, ambitious, interesting guy I know.
Well, thank you, Ian. You are too kind. I appreciate, your sentiments, and it's always such a pleasure to speak with you. I appreciate what you're doing, and your kindness emanates from your being as well. So I have to reflect back, the graciousness you're giving to me, I give it back to you.